Flash, okay, something? What's the name? Two.
All right. Okay, does our host, let's start with you two. You don't mind if I. Are you familiar with the story of Krishna encountering the Putana demoness? Putana. Yes, no, you don't remember? Okay. Okay. Let's start from Krishna Janmashtami. You know Krishna Janmashtami? Okay. Krishna was born in the prison house of Kamsa as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki at midnight. And when Krishna appeared, he appeared in a four-armed form. The symbols of Vishnu, club, conch, disc, lotus, crown, ornaments, not how a little child normally takes birth, a little different. Vasudeva first, then Devaki offered prayers to Krishna, glorifying him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in so many ways. And then there was a prayer by Devaki to assume the form of a child, because Devaki and Vasudeva have simultaneously two transcendental emotions in relation to the personality of Godhead. One is he's the Lord, the other is he's their son. So they wanted him to assume the form of a child, so he did. And the arrangement was made for Vasudeva, the father, to carry Krishna at midnight across the river Jamuna to the other side where Nanda and Jasoda lived, place Krishna by the side of Nanda and Jasoda, by Jasoda's side, and bring back the female child. Okay? That was on Krishna's appearance day. The very next day was a festival day for the appearance of Krishna as the son of Nanda. It's called Nandotsava. An utsav, or festival, was held. And he did what you do when there's festival time. He had brahmanas chanting mantras, and so forth and so on. Gave an immense charity to the brahmanas and to everybody. Very magnanimous, because he was so happy to have Krishna as his son. Then, shortly thereafter, just a couple days thereafter, it was time for Nanda to go to the capital city, Mathura, and pay taxes. Because the system of governance at the time, there was a landholder who was the king, And the king had lands, some of which was agriculture. And the agriculture ruler took care of the land, but paid taxes from what was produced from the land. That was the system. So he went to pay taxes. And he was a little concerned, more than a little concerned, because he had heard his relative and dear friend Vasudeva just had 6 children killed by the king. And he was concerned that if it became known that his son had just been born, then Kamsa might put 2 and 2 together and think, oh, that's the 8th child of Devaki that was supposed to kill me, because that's what, when he tried to kill the female child, Kamsa tried to kill the female child. I mean, his system was he took the child by the legs and was ready to smash the child on a rock. He was not a nice man. So the female child slipped from his hand, transformed herself into the form of Durga, and chastised him. That there's no use in killing me because the 8th child of Devaki has already been born and will kill you. So he's on the lookout. Kamsa's on the lookout for the 8th child of Devaki. So Nanda was concerned. He would figure it out. If he gave in charity, I have a newborn son. So he didn't give in charity to the king, although that's customary, it's cultural. But he went to pay his taxes. In the dead of night, the 2 relatives and dear friends, Vasudeva and Devaki, met. They had their exchange, that the details are described. And at the end of the exchange, Vasudeva said, you better get back to Gokul because there's going to be difficulties. He didn't say what, he didn't say how he knew, he didn't say anything. He just said, you better get back to Gokul. So early the next morning, Nanda's on his way back to Gokul. But before he got there, Putana got there. Because Putana was sent by Kamsa to kill Krishna. That's who Putana was. Putana was a she-demon, a female, who had mystic power. She could fly in the air. She was a witch. She had the power, like Prabhupada explains in his teachings, that even today in the northern parts of India, northwest parts of India, there are kitchuris, that's the Sanskrit word. They know how to fly about on a broken branch of a tree, kind of like Harry Potter, right? She knew how to do that. And she also knew how to change her shape. She was huge personality, and disheveled, misshapen, ugly, but she knew mystic power of shape-changing. So she came to Vrindavan in search for little children. And she took the form of a beautiful, looked like the goddess of fortune, or maybe one of the wives of the demigods, or decked out like anything, with a beautiful form. And so much so that the residents of Vrindavan, being very respectful of elevated persons, just respected her, let her go about her business. And right into Nanda's house, right in front of Yasoda and Devaki, Rohini. Rohini is the mother of Balaram. Rohini is the mother of Balaram. And she picked up the child and was acting like a mother. It even is said when she saw the beauty of little Krishna, she even felt maternal affection. But then at the same time, let me kill him. So she tried to kill him, but instead she got killed. And there's a whole scene that followed that. Her mystic powers were, Krishna sucked out her life air, Her 5 life airs circulate through the body. Dead. Screaming in pain, she lost her mystic power. She assumed instead her giant form. Giant means her body was 12 miles long. I mean, get out your GPS next time and see when you have to go from this place to that place and it's 12 miles. 12 miles long. She fell outside the village of Vrindavan, so she didn't fall on any homes or people. She fell on the trees. The trees got knocked over. Screaming, she left her body. And hearing all this noise and the crash of this big whatever it was sound, the elders, the parents, the mothers in particular, went running to the spot and saw Krishna playing on the body of Putana. They rescued him. They brought him to a place, Yasoda's house, where they could do rituals. The rituals are described to protect and sanctify and purify the little baby's body. He's just 6 days old. 6 days old. And then Nanda returns home because he was paying taxes, and he's coming back with some of the other elders of the cowherd community, and he sees this gigantic body lying out there. And some of the men, as is customary when a serpent dies or some vicious entity dies, you burn the body. But it was a huge body, so they had big axes, and they were cutting the body in pieces and putting it in a fire with wood. But the burning body smelled like very fragrant incense, a special kind of incense. Maybe you've heard of it before. A guru is a certain fragrance, very, very rare, refined fragrance. And then Nanda, so several things happened after that. So we finished that pastime, and now we're doing the conclusion of the pastime. The conclusion of the pastime is the discussion by our acharyas how to understand the deception that she was doing in order to, with some wicked purpose, evil purpose, killing in this case. But so similarly, our particularly Prabhupada's spiritual master, there's a nice picture of Prabhupada here. Prabhupada's spiritual master was Bhakti Siddhanta by name, Bhakti Siddhanta. And Bhakti Siddhanta's father was also a great acharya named Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So those two great acharyas describe in the path of bhakti for a practicing sadhaka, someone's beginning on the path, one of the first things they encounter, unfortunately, is people that are not really qualified spiritually, but pose themselves as teachers or gurus. So Krishna very kindly protected all the residents of Vrindavan from wicked Putana, and Krishna is more than prepared to protect us from false gurus in the same way. So that's our topic for this evening. Putana, the false guru. We've already had two classes. This is, you see, part 3 at the bottom. So, Putana Harana is taking away the burden. Taking away the burden. So the burden of what? False teachings and false teachers. Or the burden of persons who come deceptively, come in our ranks and have some other purpose. Or they pose themselves as a qualified person when they're not qualified. So it's misleading. So that's the topic. I'm going to read a little section that's describing what's the difference between weakness and deceitfulness or hypocrisy. Weakness is in one category, deceitfulness and hypocrisy is in another category. Weakness is one thing, deceitfulness is another. They are not the same. Good things happen only to a person free from deceitfulness. A deceitful person does not get any benefit. These are our acharyas giving us these teachings. Another name for straightforwardness is Vaishnavata. Vaishnavata, or the quality of a Vaishnav. A straightforward person can be weak, but he is not deceitful. A person who is deceitful says one thing and thinks another. Duplicitous, deceitful. You say one thing and what's inside is something else. A weak person is always ashamed or sorry or mortified because of their own inadequacies, but a deceitful person is proud of his own tricks. A deceitful person may try to deceive the acharya, may try to deceive a doctor. I will hide the poisonous snakes of my bad tendencies in the dark recesses of hypocrisy, and will not let anyone know about them, and I will get some name and fame from other people by pretending to be saintly. This kind of mentality is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of terrible deceitfulness. Such people will never benefit others. One gradually receives the grace of God by listening to the pure words of a sadhu in a humble, sincere mood. If we put on the garb of a devotee and become busy with non-devotional activities, if we are absorbed in material enjoyment and that becomes a priority for us, or if we take the tridanda and want to kidnap Sita, like Ravan, then we are stabbing ourselves to death. We are doing something terrible in the name of Hari Bhajan. If for millions of births we have some weakness, some bad habits, that is not so harmful. But if once we take the path of deceitfulness, we pretend to be devotees but secretly engage in sinful enjoyment, then all troubles remain with us. It is better to take birth among millions of other species as a bird or a beast or an insect. To take the path of deceitfulness is never good. That's Bhaktisiddhanta's language. Very confrontational in his manner, very, not just only straightforward, very, black and white. And he was not tolerant in one sense. He was not tolerant of deception. Weakness, he could help the person who was weak to get over their weakness, but deceitfulness was another thing. This is an image. There's no text connected with it, but I believe it's meant to show someone from their mouth comes fire. Their features are otherwise dark, but they have a fiery mouth. They speak in ways that's very detrimental to themselves and to others. That's the deceitful person. Putana also represents organized false religion. This is now another topic that both Bhakti Vinod and Bhaktisiddhanta spoke about. Organized religion that's false. As soon as the transcendental child is born, he falls into the hands of Putana, the pseudo-teachers of religion. The spread of real religion will factually remove hope for material advancement. Those are, therefore, greatly mistaken who are disposed to look forward to the amelioration or improvement of the worldly state in any worldly sense from the worldly success of any really spiritual movement. And this is Bhaktisiddhanta again. He certainly wasn't opposed to well-being of the citizens or those who are following the path of Dharma. But there is a material expectation that's unwholesome, and that is business dealing. I do good, and I expect to get some payment for my good. Like in the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj, they're very nice. I like Prahlad Maharaj a lot. After Prahlad Maharaj appeared, Nrsimhadev appeared to kill Hiranyakashipu and protect Prahlad, he was very, very angry. So the demigods tried to pacify him with prayers. He was still very, very angry. They then requested Prahlad to come forward and maybe you can pacify him. So he did. He offered prayers and the Lord became very calm. And then the Lord Nrsimhadev requested Prahlad, I want to offer you some benediction, ask whatever you like. And Prahlad's reply was, please don't ask me to ask for something. This is not a business relationship. Vanik. That a business person, they do something because they want something. But in our relationship, it's just one thing. You're the master and I'm the servant, and there's nothing more. So please don't ask me to ask for something as if our relationship is a business relationship. It's a service relationship. Now, Lord Nrsimhadev did give things, but it's not because Prahlad wanted things. And in many cases, those who take up spiritual life, I was thinking about it this afternoon. When somebody is doing, I was listening to a recording of Prabhupada speaking about people that are materially very successful. And they're materially successful because there's the fruits of their past karma, good karma. So a pious, successful person will continue to do pious activities and sacrifices and rituals. Why? Because they know it will increase their piety, which will increase their prosperity. And it's true, it does. It's true. The fruits of piety are four, according to Queen Kunti. Good birth in a good family, beauty, good education, Janma, Aishwarya, Shruta, Shri, wealth. So people like to prosper. So many people engage in religious or pious or virtuous activity because it earns them pious merit so they can prosper more. Aishwarya. From the piety comes the fruits of piety. According to what Krishna says in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, most people think that's all that religion is for, and there's nothing more. Dharma, artha, kama. And some people think of the next one, liberation. But most people that are dharmic, it's to gain the pious credits of dharma so they can have artha, so they can have kama. And they continue with piety. So what Bhaktisiddhanta is saying is that's unwholesome. The spreading of religious practice for the purpose, he's using this fancy word amelioration or improvement is a false teaching. A little sharing, it's a long little story I've said many times. During some part of my brahmachari days, I was distributing books. A good part of my brahmachari days, my life was as a book distributor. And at a certain point in time, in fact, I was part of there's this very famous part of the history of our book distribution with the Radha Damodar parties. Maybe you read about it somewhere. Traveling buses, traveling around distributing books. So I was part of the airport party for a while. And there was, at a certain point in time, the Puerto Rico airport was made legal. So I was requested, along with one other brahmachari, to go to Puerto Rico and distribute books in the Puerto Rico airport. It's like, wow, go to a heavenly planet. It's not, the climate is very nice there all year round. It gets rainy in the winter, but it's just rainy. It's not snow, and it's a nice climate. I'm forgetting why I'm telling you this story. It has to do with pious activities. The fruits of pious activities. Now I remember. I was there for about a year and a half, and then went back to New York to do a service in New York. But I had relationships with the devotees in Puerto Rico, and they really wanted me to go there and visit, so I went to visit. And I was taking a ride from the airport to where their new temple was. Their new temple was up on a hill, nice farmland, overlooking another hill that was called the rainforest. There's a name for it in Spanish. But, really, it was heaven. It was like a material heaven, the place. But to get there from the airport to their place, we had to pass through some rural-like places, and I saw right in the middle of this, there was this giant, kind of like a skyscraper, right in the middle of kind of really simple people's homes. And I asked, what's that? They said, oh, that's the infamous priest. What does that have to do with a skyscraper in the middle of residential properties? He said, there's a church right next door, and the priest teaches God wants you to prosper. Come here and worship in our church, and you'll prosper. And sure enough, the people that went to that church would prosper. So the man in charge of that church bought a property and built a skyscraper so people could buy a home in the skyscraper and just come to the church so they could prosper. Said all the other churches around, because it was Catholic country. So, but he wasn't teaching Catholicism, he was teaching God wants you to prosper. So that's what this is. If people teach and believe that in the teaching that religion is meant for that one purpose only, it's a misleading teaching. That's not what the purpose. Bhagavad Gita is very clear that one should not aspire, even for Brahmaloka, what to speak of heaven or any other place within creation, for prosperity's sake, because repeated birth and death take place. Abrahma bhuvana loka purnar arvarta norjana, in the language of Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita's teaching is very clear. One should purnar janma na. One should seek a position where you're in the spiritual atmosphere and there's no more birth and death. There's birth and death in the heavenly realms. Whatever prosperity is there, it passes and it's gone. Just like whatever prosperity here is, it passes, it's gone. The real purpose is not material prosperity. Artha. The real purpose is making an eternal connection, making a permanent solution to the problems of life. That's spiritual teaching. That's the proper guru. And the other is this other false religion. He's calling it Kaitava Dharma in the language of Bhagavatam, where people are led to believe the purpose of religion is get material prosperity, when the purpose of religion is not get material prosperity. The purpose of religion is to end the cycle of birth and death and return to the spiritual position. So therefore, this image on the left, that's something that Prabhupada spoke a lot about. There's this little image, there's a tree and a cow and a little shrine. So the shrine, I suppose, means worship, and then there's cow protection, that's the way of simple living, and high thinking, that's the worship part. That's Prabhupada's phrase, simple living, high thinking. Silencing the Putanas of false religions or false religionists. So Bhaktisiddhanta really liked to talk about this one. Let's see what he has to say. As soon as theistic disposition proper makes its appearance in the pure cognitive essence of the awakened soul, the Putanas are decisively silenced at that very early stage of their encounter with newborn Krishna. So, persons who are taking spiritual life and they encounter a teacher with the teachings that awakens the soul to the real purpose, then the Putanas, the deceiving teachers, are silenced. That's his way of saying it. Interesting language. The would-be slayer is herself slain. Putana was slain. This is the reward of the negative services that the Putanas unwittingly render to the cause of theism by strangling all hypocritical demonstrations against their own hypocrisy. In other words, persons that are inclined to materialistic pleasures, they gravitate towards such people, the false teachings, false teachers. And those that are protected by proper teachings and proper teachers, they're protected from that group of people. And what happens when you get involved with them. So now let's see. Okay, instructions of the bona fide acharya is the only way to curtail budding Putanas. Now the image that says Bhaktisiddhanta, we've been speaking about him. He is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, whose photograph is over here. There's his spiritual master. And he was very strong. English wasn't his main language, but his language is more elevated than most people that English is their primary language, like me. He has an incredible command of English language, and it's like an amazing vocabulary. So I'll read from his writings. The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 states, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. It's a very often quoted phrase that Prabhupada. Dharma is established by Bhagavan. Dharmam hi sakshat bhagavat pranitam. Bhagavan establishes Dharma. Real religion is brought to this world only by the Lord or his intimate devotee. Throughout history, Krishna, his expansions, and his empowered devotees in the form of various acharyas, prophets, and teachers have come to establish spirit in this world of matter. Out of pity for apostate jivas, there's a fancy word, impoverished, unfortunate jivas, God sends his own messenger into this world in every age for establishing the pure, or Shuddha, and eternal Sanatana Dharma, religion. in the form of constant service to Krishna. Either Krishna or Krishna's own messenger establishes the true and eternal religion in this world. This is beyond the capacity of those who are not helped by God himself. But after the disappearance of the founder, care of the church falls into the hands of senior followers who, by default, become the high priests, pastors, rabbis, imams, popes, pastors, and gurus. Although these new leaders may be following the rituals, ceremonies, and practices given by their preceptor-founder, if they have not come to the platform of spiritual realization and still possess material desires, then their vision of transcendental religion given by their preceptor-founder will be mundane. Not being on the realized platform, they will be unable to give the same transcendental necessities that the founder was distributing. The most merciful Lord descends at times to depute his servants, the dwellers of that blessed region, to the benighted inhabitants of this ungodly world. And sometimes, out of his great mercy, the Supreme Lord himself comes down into our midst. The Lord himself and his obedient servants alone know the real nature of the transcendental world. Those souls that are engrossed in matter are ignorant of the true nature of spiritual region. This happens to be so because the fallen souls, being altogether averse to Krishna from time immemorial, by reason of the vast variety of material bodies, which were successively endowed by physical nature as the result of their ungodly activities, have remained without sight of Krishna for an incalculably long period. His sentences are really long. How then can we expect them, the conditioned souls, to remember and tell us the tidings of the transcendental world? Can a person who has never been to England give us true information regarding that country? The analogy of this mundane world does not, of course, apply fully to the case of the supra-mundane. In this world, for instance, one who has never been to England may, by learning the account of that country from others who have visited it, be able to understand and also to convey to others information thus obtained. This is feasible because Bengal and England happen to be countries that are both situated within the limits of this physical universe, and materially one country resembles the others. Therefore, it is possible for a person who is acquainted with the conditions of one country to understand the description of others from the pen or lips of a person who happens to be, like himself, a denizen of their common universe. But the spiritual world is quite unlike this physical world. The two are, in fact, centered on opposite poles. Therefore, it is not at all surprising that, engrossed as we are in the experience of this world, we fail to understand the real meaning of such accounts of the spiritual world, as have been written or declared for our benefit by those who have had the privilege of possessing the true knowledge of that transcendental region. It is all the more so because the instruments with whose help fallen souls have to study those accounts are themselves the cross threads and the texture that binds us to this world. Meaning they're too engrossed in materialism to understand transcendentalism. They're using instruments that are materially honed to understand that which is beyond the material. So they don't have the capacity. Those who consider that by means of this material mind, intelligence, and perverted ego, it is possible to undertake the investigation of the spiritual kingdom and to enlighten other people regarding the same, and that it is possible to, with the help of such a mind, to understand the nature of the spiritual world by studying the works of seers and explaining the same to others, are called philanthropists. Someone who views spiritual substance in a mundane way, with mundane vision. In the sense that something, turns, has been used by the devotees of God. Something wrong with the spelling here. Okay, anyway. At the disappearance of the religion's founder prophet, if the new heirs to the priesthood harbor material desires for prestige and position, they tend to take advantage of the situation and accept the roles of religious leaders, even though they are not truly qualified. They are unquestionably accepted and supported by materialistic laity. Laity means the common people. There's the priestly class and there's the laity, the congregational folks, laity. Anyway, so it's what he's saying here is clear. It's the continuation of pure teachings rests in the hands of the successive generation. And the successive generation has a big responsibility, not just to do rituals and follow procedures, but to become qualified themselves in realization of the teachings of their teacher. And if not, it's going to sag. Putana is the slayer of all infants. This is another under this category. Putana is the slayer of all infants. The baby, when he or she comes out of the mother's womb, falls at once into the hands of the pseudo-teachers of religion. These teachers are successful in forestating the attempts of the good preceptor, whose help is never sought by atheists of this world at the baptism of their babies. This is ensured by the arrangements of all established churches of the world. They have been successful only in supplying watchful putanas for Zhukong. Excuse me, that's a Chinese name. I skipped a page. For effecting the spiritual destruction of persons from the moment of their birth with cooperation of worldly parents. Now, it sounds like he's speaking to a Western audience because he's using Christian terms. Laity is a Christian term, and baptism is a Christian term. So it sounds like he's speaking to people with that kind of an upbringing. Although he is speaking in Bengal, so who knows? What's true for the Western background folks is true for the non-Eastern background folks. That is, we all have the experience of growing up. And growing up, we are getting a worldly education, we're also getting some kind of a spiritual education. We have some ideas, and we have some practices that we do that connect with those ideas, and we become, accustomed to doing things a certain way, following some tradition that we were introduced to. It's all of us, and all of us have had the opportunity to come in contact with different teachings, even after we were introduced to some teachings, and then to have the opportunity, all of us, to come in contact with disciplic succession, and then pull our chin and consider, I grew up this way, and now I'm hearing something that's not exactly with what I grew up with. It's not exactly totally different, but it's not the same. And so now I'm kind of have some affinity for what I've been accustomed to, and my family and whatever tradition is involved with. And then there's these other teachings that are disciplic succession teachings that resonate. And they feel right. And so how do I process all this? There's different feelings that come. I don't want to abandon or feel ungrateful for what I received, or things like that. How do we continue to take advantage of this? Is the false teacher and false teachings paradigm, and it's not by design, where the successive generation or generations rub their hands together and think, fantastic, we have now this organization or group of people, and we can do with them whatever we like. Most likely their intentions are good intentions. They're not explicitly, deliberately Putanas. Like, let me take advantage of people and exploit them. Now, there are some people that are like that. That's a certain category. But he's making the point that aside from those group of people, there's some persons that just don't have the capacity to deliver transcendence because they haven't connected with it adequately themselves. So what to do? So one needs to find those that have connected adequately and can transmit the message both by word and by their action, by prachar and by achar. They can exhibit both, and consistently both. I'll just read one more paragraph and we'll go on. Attached to their reputation and external ritualism, Kamsa and his minions such as Putana do not appreciate the appearance of bona fide transcendentalists. For realized spirituality is a threat to Kamsa's mechanical branch of churchism. Interesting. Putana does not at all like to receive her reward in the only form that involves the total destruction of her wrong personality. She was benefited. When Putana was killed, not just her sinful deeds were now finished, or the reactions to her sinful deeds were eradicated, but Krishna very kindly, most mercifully, elevated her not only to the platform of liberation, but to Krishna Loka, where she would eternally reside with Mother Jasoda as an assistant in Krishna Loka. Not a bad deal. Very, 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 very merciful. And then consistently, Shukadeva Goswami says, then what to speak of? How merciful is Krishna to Putana? What to speak of those who sincerely make offerings of milk or other items that one may offer to to Krishna in his deity form, with sincere, humble desire or petition to Krishna, please accept this offering. Offering with love and devotion, in other words, exactly what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Those that do like that, how much are they benefited? But the Kamsas and the Putanas of this world, they don't like those that genuinely represent, because it interferes with their business. They have worldly business to look after. And it doesn't help the kingdom of Kamsa. thinking of China. Just sharing a little bit, China sharing. This new chairman of the Communist Party has displaced the previous Communist Party chairman's policies. The previous Communist Party chairman was growing and growing and growing internally the infrastructure of China, from an agricultural country to now their big industrial country and wealthy country, world influence country. With this new chairman, so the government was, this is a little sharing, they were checking us out without details, but for about 15 years. They're really control freaks. They would know everything about everything, and they would get to find out about whatever they didn't know, and they knew what they needed to know. They were watching us, but we were small time compared to other religious organizations who were far more aggressive. There's lots of details. There's two common sayings in China. China is a government of law. Makes sense. China is a government of law. 2, in China there are 5 recognized religions. And Hare Krishna is not one of them. Or Hinduism is not one of them. But the ones that they recognize, they really control, like what they're doing with the Muslims. Whether one can say right or wrong, but just recent, so it's since this new chairman has been elected, the very year that he got this big vote, for so many years he could rule. With that came a document this thick of just laws governing religion. And it gave lots of teeth and claws to the government. And nobody really knew how much they were going to implement it, but they could implement whatever they wanted. Now, just this past month, there's a new document this thick with a new set of regulations on top of the older regulations that show more teeth and more claws. And it's specific to foreign influence. So I don't know what's going to happen for those of us that visit China. I didn't read it yet because I've been busy with this seminar, but it was the gloss of it is specifically for Christian, Muslim, and Catholic groups. They make it 2 of the 5 are Protestant and Catholic. They're both Christian, but they make those are 2 of the 5. They're loud, but they really control them. And especially the missionary-oriented ones, the evangelical ones. They're really scrutinizing and controlling, really, very carefully. One of our, is it okay to speak like this? And I'm being recorded and people are going to listen to it. Maybe I shouldn't. I was going to tell another little detailed story. They control. And because they're like, it's like Kamsa. They don't want. And it makes sense. I mean, if you want to be a control person, if you have people that have faith in something other than you got competition going on. And religion can be like, people can get really strong and be very dedicated, devoted to something. And if it's not the government, you're a controlled government. You don't want that. So they chop it before it even grows. And they're on top of it. They're not like, they don't take it lightly. So it's not easy. At the same time, the people want something genuine. And so when they get something genuine, it's, woo! It kind of backfires in one sense. I know, but they have the Kamsa-like and Putana-like personalities are in opposition to Krishna. or a seeker to connect with Krishna. But a seeker that wants to connect with Krishna, when they get a contact with Krishna or a genuine representative of Krishna, it's something moves inside, and it helps. The devotees that are wanting something genuine respond very well to something that's genuine. It's something like when you're hungry and you have a nice meal, you feel very satisfied. What to speak of if not just somebody that knows the art of cooking, but they're very devotional, then even a little something is so satisfying. You don't need so much. It's like that. Gluttony is not the way of satisfaction, but refined consciousness is the way of satisfaction. That's what he's describing here. Okay, we'll move on. Putana, the universal problem. Hypocrisy is condemned in all religions, all literature. So let's go through quickly, and we'll conclude with this. Here's some quotes from Sikh teachings. Here's Dr. Sadhu Singh Dhami of the Sikhs and their religion. He writes, "The followers of established religions soon degenerate into smugness and of self-seeking comfort and ease, out of which their masters once shook them with their inspiring message. The hard road of truth and self-sacrifice is abandoned for the byways of personal gain and egotism. The religious idealism is lost in a barrage of high-sounding words and eloquent phrases. They worship the form instead of the spirit, the symbol instead of the essence, and hinder their development by narrow creed and stultifying dogma. Their leaders cease to live their religion, semicolon. They begin to use it as a means to earn a comfortable living. The established religious hierarchy uses all the tricks of power politics to keep itself in the saddle." That's pretty strong from speaking about his own religion. Here's Christianity, quotes directly from the Bible. This is the New Testament. Mark, in the book of Mark, "And Jesus said to them," quote, "Well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, thus people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men." Then another is, when Jesus discovered that materialistic persons had taken over the temple and were using it as a place to sell things to maintain themselves, he went into the temple and began to cast out them that sold therein, and them that bought, saying unto them, "It is written that my house is the house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." Anyway, hypocrisy. You have something good and it becomes not good anymore after some time through hypocrisy. In Judaism, this is from the Talmud. King Alexander Jannaeus said to his wife, "Fear not the true Pharisees, nor the non-Pharisees, but those hypocrites who ape the Pharisees." So hypocrisy. In Buddhism, there's just two more. "What is the use of your matted hair, O witless man? What is the use of your antelope skin garment? within you are full of passions. Without, you embellish yourself with paraphernalia of an ascetic. Hypocrisy is not appreciated. And last is Confucianism. I'm sure Confucius has something nice to say. This is the Tzu Kung asked about the true gentleman. The master said, he does not preach what he practices until he has practiced what he preaches. Then another, this is Confucius. The master said, a gentleman is ashamed to let his words outrun his deeds. So this is, all of this has to do with Putana's hypocrisy. She posed herself in one way and her intention was something else. And fortunately, Krishna became the object and she got purified. But for those of us that are not yet in contact with Krishna and wish to be in contact with Krishna, the message is, if the desire is sincere and the intention from our side is sincere, Krishna will send us, he will protect us and send us true teachings and the power of discrimination to protect us from the other kind. So we had a lot of questions this morning that were unanswered. And maybe we can start with this morning's unanswered questions, and then we'll go into the room, and then we'll go back to the ones that were from tonight. And it's late already. Go ahead. Do you have the microphone? Sorry for the abrupt ending. I just lost track of time.
Question is from Ratnavali, Mataji. Politics is a lot everywhere.
Turn the volume up a little.
Politics is a lot everywhere. So unfortunately, it also lies in local groups. If we find such situations, can we still just take the teachings and still associate just Krishna Katha and come back and be attached to our spiritual master? Will that kind of association contaminate us?
You can be protected if you have the proper shelter, and you can be an agent of the opposite. That is to say, by spiritual strength. This is the same answer as I like Prabhupada's answer about will you be infected if you contact some disease? The question that was asked of Prabhupada is, one person gets disease, another person doesn't get disease, is that due to karma? Prabhupada's answer was, if your resistance is low, you'll contract the disease. If your resistance is not low, you won't contract the disease. So in response to Ratnavali's question, if you're spiritually fit, you can give good association rather than receiving bad association. If you're weak, you'll receive bad association, and you may be infected or affected. So if you have that sense of I want to be an agent or an instrument of disciplic succession, so let me go into the Sangha and not be judgmental and not be defensive, but let me try to be an example of our disciplic succession in this Sangha. And then you won't be infected. Just make sure you have good sadhana. And it also depends upon the degree of politics or material consciousness that's conducting the prevalent in that Sangha. You may want to find another Sangha, depending.
Next question is from Tarani Radha. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. What's this?
Smells like alcohol.
Is it mandatory to understand all the details of Krishna's pastimes
No,
to relish the same?
no.
Example, Gauranga Mahaprabhu encourages the South Indian Brahmana who could not even read the Bhagavad Gita, but he was relishing it as he was following the order of his guru.
Yeah, that's sufficient.
Next question is from Yamuna. Dearest Maharaj,
She's in California, by the way. That was this morning?
yeah.
Gee, that means she was up at 4:30 in the morning hearing the morning class. Phew.
Dearest Maharaj, is it that our false ego and mind are all false gurus when we listen to them due to their conditioning?
Is it that our false ego is what?
Is it that our false ego and mind are like false gurus
Yes,
when we listen to them?
yes, exactly.
And then she says, due to their conditioning, that's her.
Yeah, we're conditioned by
Yeah.
those things.
Next question from Monica from India. I wanted to know if there's any relation as to Putana, who is like a false guru, is the first demon to be killed by Lord Krishna to our initial stages of the devotional path. Like devotional life begins only when we get the association or mercy of our bona fide spiritual master. And the first demoniac nature in our case is not being genuine within the core of our heart. And when we are genuine within ourselves minimally, then Krishna helps us by sending our bona fide guru form where our devotional life begins.
Yes, well done, well done. Sadhu, sadhu.
Next is from Govinda, Varshana Mataji's son,
Huh.
5 years old. Maharaj, how does a sinful person like Putana have power to transform their appearance?
She wasn't a spiritual person, she was a wicked person, but she had mystic powers. And sometimes wicked persons can get mystic powers through wicked means. They engage in austerities and penances and other things like that with the intention of getting some power that they can then misuse. So the word in Sanskrit is kriti or merit, and merit can be used in a good way or a bad way. Duskriti or sukriti. Just like someone may have $1 million and they can use it for bad purposes. Another person can have $1 million and use it for good purposes. The problem is not in the $1 million or having it or not having it. The problem is how it's used. Good use or improper use.
And Amrita Keli. Guru Maharaj, the story of Jaratkava, the vulture, was in my language subject in 4th or 5th grade
No kidding.
as part of the curriculum. Somehow that story stayed with me since then. Every time I remember that story, I feel sad for Jaratkava and feel it is kind of unfair what happened to him just for being nice and trusting someone. Could you please help? How do we understand this? Is it because of past karma or some insincerity in its heart?
Not past karma or insincerity in heart. I mean, nice stories always have a happy ending, and this one doesn't. It's to teach us to be careful about hypocrites. That's what it's intended. So be careful when you associate with persons who are hypocritical and you don't take, appropriate steps in dealing with their hypocrisy, you can have a problem. So don't be a hypocrite and don't be naive about hypocrites.
And part 2 of that question, regarding Dirgha Karna, the cat, it seems like it just got away with its duplicitous mentality, which was disturbing to me as a child. Do we understand that it has to go through the bad karma or the punishment in its next life? Do we see this story in the light of why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah, I like that. That's it? Really? Okay. How are we doing in the room? Any thoughts, comments, questions? You got to press the green button.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So my question is, I think you mentioned when we brought up with...
When we do what?
Brought up with some impressions, and we meet spiritual master, and that thing is little different.
Could you turn the speaker this way? Whoa. Because I'm a little hard of hearing. Pardon me.
Sorry.
That's better.
So when we brought up, sorry about my English, we brought up with some kind of impressions, and when we meet spiritual master, and that those things are little different. So how we should surrender to spiritual master without any speculations, or how to gradually go there?
So let me see if I've understood your question correctly. We're growing up in this world, and we are receiving some inputs from parents and friends and teachers and so forth, and we're carrying all this with us. And then we encounter spiritual master, and we're reflecting back and are influenced by those past things, the past impressions of teachers and friends and parents and so forth. How do we process where we've been to where we're going? That's your question.
Yeah. And if I have a faith that it's going to
work out all right.
Work out. But
you just want to know how to process.
Yeah, how to process, and how not to speculate anything, and just to...
Okay, well, specifically you're asking how to not speculate anything.
And submit it, surrender completely.
A struggle that I went through, and probably others have gone through, that is, I didn't want to be betraying that tradition from which I came. I didn't want to betray my parents. I didn't want to betray the religious tradition that I grew up with and embraced. So I was feeling I don't want to be a ungrateful person. And what helped me, because this is not exactly your question is how do I not speculate, but maybe it will answer your question. I didn't have any doubt about where I was going. The concern was being ungrateful to what I have received from where I've been. And how it got resolved, it was really like a wonderful feeling. Gratitude towards what I have received up to this point, and because I had received what I had received, it helped me embrace the going forward to something that with greater clarity and greater spirit, essence. So I was able to make the transition smoothly rather than uncomfortably, with gratitude in my heart towards what I had received from where I've been. Now, your specific question is about speculation. Now, speculation, does it have to do with the past or where you're going to going forward in time? Or both?
I think my question is that I know few things that I learned in some way, but now they look to be different. So how?
Now
is
they
a
look to
small
be different.
example.
Well, if I'm trying to understand your question, but let me just, there's essences, and the essences that resonated when you were younger are probably something very similar to the essence of what you're receiving going forward in time. The form, the shape, and how it looks, and maybe even how it felt, and some of the procedures, rituals, and customs surrounding it may be somewhat different, but you go to the essence. And the essence is just, the seed is maturing into something that's more a mature stage than just the seed stage. Does that help?
Yes, Maharaj. Yeah. But
You want to do what she's suggesting, and give an example from something, or that now is not the right time and place to do that?
Maybe I have to think, but to know that if I don't know, if I'm still processing that, right?
That's
So,
okay.
Yeah, that I may not think something that it's not right or it's wrong. What I learned is correct or not, now it's correct or not. So those speculations should not be there. Is it okay if
It's okay.
those thoughts come?
Yes. The keeping it really simple, I want to know. Brahma Jigyasa. And to have that inquisitive spirit to want to know, that's wholesome. And it's not exactly, judging right, wrong. It's just, I want the essence, and bhakti is the essence, and it may have looked like this and felt like that or something, but what I want is the essence. So it's not so much judging right or wrong. Let me move towards the essence, and that's my life. And I feel trust or faith that what I'm doing, the path that I'm moving on, is taking me to that essence, to Shuddha Bhakti. Whatever it was, I'm thinking of my life, whatever it was that I was doing was a lot of ignorance, but some essences. And now let me go to the essence that I did receive and mature it and grow it. And I would think that the same principle can apply to yourself. Whatever it is that you received, you don't have to, it wasn't necessarily right or wrong. I mean, I can say the eating habits that I grew up with that were just condoned as, that's just fine, is not just fine. But I'm not condemning the way that I was brought up, or the way that the religious practices and the way my family lived, the way that they lived, because they just didn't know better. So, but I don't have to judge it. It's just I'm moving forward with a life of devotion, guided by proper teachings and proper teachers, and spend less time about right and wrong, and more focus on the essence of a life of devotion, and what are the principles, and how to apply the principles of a life of devotion effectively. Go more towards the light, and the darkness will dissipate. Okay?
Thank you.
Here he goes.
My question is, so if you're in like a religion now and you want to change to Krishna consciousness as your religion, and you change from your first religion, does everything count? Like, whatever
Does
you
everything
did,
count?
like, does everything that you did, good and bad, still count when you're like, when you die? Like, does all your good and bad karma still count from your last religion and this religion?
Well, if I've understood your question correctly, it'll be, here's some good news for you. Bhakti has the power to just dissolve all of that. It's like a fire, and you put fuel in the fire and it's gone. Bhakti has the power to dissolve karma completely. Now, because Bhakti has the power to dissolve karma completely, doesn't mean, hey, that's a really good program. I can go on doing whatever I want to do some Bhakti, and it'll take care of the karma. That's cheating. But if you live a life of devotion, then all those past things, they're not going to be, you're not going to be accountable for them because they're dissolved. Clear? If you go to, same as somebody said to your mom, if you go towards the light, darkness is behind you. When you're facing the sun, your shadow is behind you. And if you turn away from the sun, there's shadow, there's not the sun. So you go towards the sun, you go towards devotion to Krishna, and all of that's not going, you're not held accountable for it. It's back there. It's dissolved. Good news? Yeah, okay. Anyone else in the room here? Well,
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I think I would like to first express my gratitude for for today morning you were teaching about the honest worship, about the
speak into the microphone.
About the honest worship. When a devotee does a honest worship, then you will have your spiritual guru comes in. So I was looking, that remembers me the Hare Krishna movie of Srila Prabhupada.
Oh, yeah.
Where one of the devotee was honestly expressing his gratitude, saying that I don't have to travel all the way to India to get the spiritual knowledge. So I'm honest, I'm humbly expressing my gratitude to all those devotees because of their prayers, Srila Prabhupada came all the way here and given this new world for all the devotees on it. So maybe those sincere prayers might brought Srila Prabhupada all over here to give us on it.
Thanks for sharing that.
And I think I have a question related to the remembering of Sri Guru, where I think Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur expresses saying that you should remember every year, every month, every day, and every hour on it. But I think if you are not doing it, you are falling into the false Guru as such. How do I
By cultivation. I mean, to always think of something means there's attachment. And in a relationship, it takes some investing in the relationship to develop attachment in that relationship. Otherwise, it's transitory, like the things of this world. But transcendental attachment, it requires, it becomes consistent when there's cultivation over time. You invest in the relationship and it becomes something that you're like your family members, you're with each other all the time, so there's attachment. So hear regularly and apply the principle of doing what you do for Guru and Krishna, and it becomes, the attachment follows. It's just natural. It's completely natural. By cultivation, over time. Srila Prabhupada left this world in 1977. This is 2020. So that's a few years, right? Like 43 years. And I don't feel less connected to Prabhupada. So how is that possible? But, I regularly, daily, several times a day hear his recorded lectures and read his books and stay connected by that method, by sound. So there's attachment. It's not cosmetic, not circumstantial. You follow? That's how.
Thank you, Mother.
Behind you? We're getting everybody really trained up with this microphone. And it smells like alcohol.
Yeah, Krishna Maharaj, in relation to false teachings and hypocrisy, I have a doubt about the Vedic ritualistic practices that are encouraged in the communities, that whichever, other than Hare Krishna temples, wherever you go, Vedic rituals for Artha, whatever, they go for demigod worships. So they are not actually putting the real teachings in place.
You're not actually doing what?
They are not encouraging those who are coming there with these real teachings, that supreme absolute truth. Rather, they are just encouraging them to do their ritualistic ceremonies.
Okay.
Does that come under false?
A lot of it depends upon, the character of the individual. Meaning, the whole of the Vedic process, even those rituals, they have at the very beginning a mantra that states the bhokta of the yajna, and the bhokta is Vishnu. It's built into the system that the bhokta is Vishnu. Now that may not be in the forefront of their mind. So otherwise we would have to say that Vyasadeva gave misleading teachings. The Vedas are not misleading teachings, but people don't know the intention or the purpose behind those teachings, and therefore they miss the boat, or they don't get the full benefit that can be derived from those teachings. Therefore, one requires a proper teacher. So if the proper teacher conducts some rituals, then the result is there. Here's a nice example from Krishna book, or from Krishna's pastimes. On the occasion of Shivaratri, Nanda Maharaj took the residents of Vrindavan to a Shiva temple not so far away, and they had a 3-day festival, a Shivaratri festival. But they weren't worshiping Lord Shiva the way that non-Vaishnavas will worship Lord Shiva. But they saw him in the way that a Vaishnava will see Lord Shiva, and they're respecting him in that way. So it's just the circumstance of not having pure teachers and pure teachings will result in, by default, taking rituals, if one takes rituals, and engaging in them without proper understanding. Avidhi purvakam, in the language of Bhagavad Gita. However, if somebody has proper vidhi, proper teachings, then they understand that those aren't required. But the Brijbasis, they were religious people. They certainly were religious people. They observed religious procedures. And they knew the procedures. And they followed the procedures. They were dharmic people with Krishna at the center. Okay.
So, just to follow up on the purpose that the people go for demigod worship and where there is no such teachings, but the Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that if they come to me, whatever the four kinds of people come to
Yeah.
Krishna, so that becomes a devotional service.
Yes. Yes. We have a very streamlined process. The Hare Krishna movement has the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu have a very streamlined process. Those extra things are not required based upon the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. That is, you pour water on the root of the tree and everything gets benefit, gets the water. You put food in the stomach and the whole body gets energy. You worship Krishna and everything is accomplished. That's our teaching, and that's our practice. Supposing somebody is not prepared to be a follower of Lord Chaitanya or those same teachings, there's a safety net for those people. They can do other things and make some connection at least. Is that
Thank you.
addressing your question? Your good wife has something?
Guru Maharaj, I was thinking, lot of isms they have the duplicity they don't accept. Even Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was not tolerant about that. Then I was thinking, even the person who has the duplicity, maybe because of his own things in the back. So, is there any way that kind of a person can be helped?
Sure. Good association. And a whack in the head sometimes. But it takes a qualified person to do that so that on the receiving end, the person can understand that it was delivered out of love, not out of malice. We have some two online. Any of our younger people, you three, I'm inviting you to participate.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I'm talking about me.
Speak right into the microphone.
Okay. Can you?
Much better. Thanks.
Yeah. So even though spending, doing prayers and putting doing Hare Krishna in mind when we are doing some other stuff.
Okay.
But some negative thoughts, negative thoughts will be there all the time. It's not let's say something will come up into the mind. But in person, it is not intentionally not the thing, but it is coming into those things, some kind of stuff. So how to overcome all those things?
When you cook in the kitchen, sometimes there's a mess in the kitchen after you cook. So what do? You go clean. And however long it takes, you clean till it's clean. So same with the mind. Cheto darpana marjanam. This is a writing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The first effect of chanting or spiritual hearing, the mind becomes cleansed. So it takes time for the mind to become cleansed. It's not like you go into the kitchen that's dirty and you say, okay, kitchen, get clean. So it may take some time.
Right.
But if you attend to cleanliness in the kitchen, it becomes easier to keep the kitchen clean than if you neglect it, then it takes much longer. So be diligent in your practice of sadhana, and the unclean condition of the mind will subside. Here's a little Prabhupada story. The temple president in Los Angeles when Prabhupada was there for some period of time, his name was Karandar. He was known as a really good administrator, really good, really top-notch administrator. And he shared with Prabhupada, before he became a devotee, I was more peaceful. And now I'm finding my mind is always disturbed. Why is that? And Prabhupada said, use a similar example. He said, supposing you go into a house that's been neglected for decades, and you want to stay there, and you're trying to make it clean. What happens? Dust goes flying all over the place. But keep cleaning, because it was neglected for a long time, and keep cleaning and cleaning and cleaning, and finally becomes a very inviting place to be once it's clean.
Really? Yeah. Very true, Prabhu.
So it's not the finger pointing program and saying, you've been neglectful, but we've been in the material atmosphere for who knows how many lifetimes, and here we are trying to move in a spiritual direction, and there's a lot of clutter. There's stuff that's accumulated, as you use the word, stuff that's accumulated just by material contact. So it's going to take some time to move. So it's not that in the clean condition your mind is blank, but in the clean condition your mind is towards spiritual thought and spiritual affinity and spiritual attachment. And then when that kind of attachment is there, the other goes away. Because this is so much more attractive if you feel so satisfied. Like a child can play and 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 play. When you're an adult, you can sit with the child and play child things, but it doesn't hold the same attention. You can ride a tricycle a little bit, maybe, but how long can you ride a tricycle? When you're a kid, you can do it for all day long. When you have a higher taste, those other things just don't hold the same attraction anymore as they did when you were little. So the mature stage of higher taste will take you away from stuff, the distracted things that are there just because of prolonged material contact, who knows how many lifetimes. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Prabhu.
Now we're going to pass the microphone over here and we're going to end. Very thorough. Well done.
This is from Taruni Radha. Even a small thing that we say or do, which is inconsistent with our consciousness, pricks our consciousness. I have always wondered, how do some people just continue their horrible acts without their consciousness being affected? Is it that their consciousness is completely covered?
It certainly can be like that. And there may be other reasons, but when people are really dull, they don't even know what they're doing.
Next is from Chandana, from Naperville. Maharaj, until such time that we are purified and shorn of envy, my understanding is we practice compassion even if there are various things in the mind. Is that being deceitful or hypocritical?
No, it's cultivation. I mean, it comes back to Sachi Kumar's question of intention. And if the intention is deception, then it's deceptive. And if you're trying to cultivate, even though I'm not there yet, it's not deceptive. It's sadhana or practice.
Next question is from Prema Manjari. Mataji, my question is, if younger devotees do something wrong, then we can say it with love. But how about senior devotees? How should we respond or act towards them?
Depends. Depends how big they are. I mean, we can excuse, or we can, in a right time, place, circumstance, and mood, say something, or we can speak to someone who is a peer of that someone and express, I'm feeling these feelings, and if you feel it's appropriate, you may wish to do something. You place, you know, your situation in their hand, and there's different things you can do. One of the rules in spiritual life in general is be very cautious about judging. It's important. There's a distinction between discerning, like, you know, there was some question about right and wrong, but understanding according to the instruction of Bhagavad Gita, this falls in the category of goodness, falls in the category of passion, this falls in the category of ignorance. We don't stop discerning, but judging is, something cautioned against. Judging is, I'm a judge, and I find you guilty, and you deserve punishment, and you should be. I'm going to decide how you should be punished, or at least feel that you should be punished this way, that way. That's not our position. Unless you're in some governance position, then it is your position. But so be very cautious about judging. It can be very hurtful to you, spiritually. Discerning is one thing, judging is another thing. That's it. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Yeah.